also want, yes, it is. Okay, so let me just say a little bit from we're gonna have the me and my three delegates will give remarks about what they're going to be doing this year and what's happening, and then we'd like to we've got a whole bunch of questions that we'd like to address tonight. So um, it's going to be a really interesting year, obviously. We start next Wednesday. There will be no public coming in, no lobbyists hanging around, apparently. Everything that we do, actually, there will be more of what we do that will be virtual. So all hearings, all voting sessions, all briefings, everything will be online so that some of us will work from home and some will work in Annapolis, but we'll all be there next Wednesday to get sworn in anyway. And then the Senate's going to be doing more work, I think, at least on Fridays on the Senate floor so that we can send work over to the House as early as we can to get things moving. With the COVID the way it is, it's kind of fluid. We're you make plans, but nothing is set in concrete. Everything is open to change depending on how the pandemic works, how we do with getting the vaccines out. Um, I mean, we're hearing that the vaccines will be available soon, and if you go to the governor's website, didn't get a chance to copy it, but if you go to the governor's website tonight, it tells about the vaccine and how that's going to be administered in the state. So that's a good thing. Um, the major focus this year, and I've been telling a lot of people that have lots of bills, our focus is going to be on COVID and COVID recovery. It just has to be. Um, we have a lot of people hurting. Um, I was talking to Tom Hucker. I think Tom Hucker's on here tonight from the county council tonight. Montgomery County is really hurting financially. We've got people that are going to be homeless. We've got people that are hungry, and so a lot of what we do in Annapolis is going to be how do we spend that federal funding um, in ways that it's going to help our people the most. So being on the budget committee, that's one of the major things that I mean, we're just spending a lot of time trying to figure out the best way to spend any money that we do get. So one of the things that people have asked about is the Kerwin, the education plan. That's something that we've worked on for years, and it's a plan that will actually help in changing education to the way that we think will be the most productive for our kids. And so I see it going forward. I see it maybe taking a little bit longer than it we had planned for it to be fully implemented, but I sure see Kerwin going forward. Um, I think one thing that will happen is we will override the governor's veto, and then we'll come up with our own plan for how we're going to fund it and how what we do with each step implementing the plan. So have that going. I've got several different childcare bills. That's always my favorite issue, but I've got one that grants a tax credit for low income families for childcare. Um, that's one that I think should help. I mean, we're just looking because we can't solve all of it. Just trying to find the legislation or the way that we can help the most people with as much money as we can get to put into it. So that's kind of where we are. And let me just say, and I've said this before about COVID, this is a learning experience for all of us. None of us have been through this before. We are, I think, doing the very best that we can to make the right decisions and spend the money the way we can and do the right thing for our people. So but we're always open for suggestions. All of you know how to reach me, that you know how to reach all our delegates too. Happy to talk with any of you. if you're interested in getting what I do is a news blast each week during session. And if you don't get that emailed to you, if you you can send me a message or whatever, I'll get you on our email list. We try not to abuse it. If we just kind of tell you what's going on and what's happening in session, what some of the bills are that we're doing. So would love to have you on my list, and would love to hear from you. I think I'm going to close up right now and turn it over to my delegates. I see Kirill grinning at me because he always thinks I talk too much. And so take it away, Kirill.
Full disclosure, I was grinning because my wife came in here hand gesturing and mouthing so that she wouldn't speak and interrupt, that she needed my wallet to order food. So that's what that grinning was all about. Well, thank you, everyone. It's great to have everyone here. It's been quite a day. I know that Congressman Trone has spoke about it, and I think he has more gravitas to speak about it than any of us because he was there when it all happened. But such a sad and pathetic way to welcome such great news in the morning. I will say this: I know that I got to share in the in Congress's celebration at 3:30 in the morning when they finally concluded the vote, because my phone buzzed with a news alert that it was done, and I woke up, and that was the end of my sleeping for the night. But we are here to talk about session. This is our annual send-off dinner. And, the reality is we would much rather be buying you all a pasta dinner and getting together and being able to hug each other, something that I haven't done outside of my own family in what seems like an eternity. So and be able to talk and tell stories and just get ready for this upcoming session. We can't do that. We're on Zoom, but it's still great to see so many people joining us. It's wonderful to see so many friends and familiar faces and folks that support us and work with us, and sometimes give us a piece of your mind when we're not quite doing what you want us to do, and working to make the state a better place. What Nancy said about session, I would say ditto for the House, with the exception of, we're not going to get started on floor work as early as the Senate. A decision has been made at the Speaker's office and with senior leadership. We will all be there next Wednesday. We're all going to show up. We're all going to ring in. The first order of business is going to be to change all of the rules. I don't know. I haven't seen a draft of them yet. They're going to be distributing the draft soon, but I don't know if it's a permanent change or a temporary change, but we're going to be changing the rules that will allow us to not have to show up to floor session until we are ready. The current rules require us to physically show up every single day and have a floor session, even if it means ringing in, making announcements, and then ringing out when there's no floor work yet. So we're going to be changing those rules. The Speaker, the Majority Leader, and the Minority Leader, the three of them, will constitute a quorum for the purposes of that until we are ready to do floor work. And then we will retreat to wherever we want to retreat to, our personal homes, our offices in Annapolis, wherever. And then we will commence doing hearings. I know that most committees are starting from the next day. The second day we'll have hearings, which is unusual for us. And we will start hearing bills, and at some point we will get back together for floor work and start hearing them on the floor. The House is going to be split. I know the Senate is not. You guys have all those really great telephone booths that they've set up for you in the Senate chamber. We can't do that in the House. There's just not enough room.
They look like jail cells.
They do look like transparent jail cells. It is as appropriate because that's where senators belong. But we are actually going to be split. So the Montgomery County and Baltimore County delegation rooms in the House office building which has a temporary partition wall, is going to be taken down, and we will have tables set up in that portion that will house half of the legislature. The other half of the legislature will be in the House office building. The speaker will preside over the House. The speaker pro tem will preside over the House annex, is what we're calling it. We are going to be connected digitally. We're going to see everything going on in both chambers. We're all going to have, those of us who are going to be in the annex, myself included, are going to have tablets to vote on. So we'll be able to vote digitally on legislation. And we will see if we can make it work. The one thing that I've been trying to impart to people is, and I'm not, the way that I'm going to say this is going to sound worse than it is. But what I've been trying to tell people is we're not going to get as much done as we have in previous years. And I think we just need to expect that. If the House is not going to be on the floor passing legislation for 3 to 4 weeks, that means that when we come back, first order of business is going to be veto overrides. And there are 40 veto overrides that we have to do. That's going to take a lot of work. That's going to take a lot of time. We have to pass the budget. That's going to take a lot of time. One of the other rules that the Speaker's office has determined is we're not going to be on the floor for extended periods of time. We're going to be on the floor for an hour and a half at a time so that we are not overly exposed to each other for long periods of time. So if we're not going to be there for a third of the session and we're only going to be there for an hour and a half at a time, we're just probably not going to be able to get through as much work as we need to get to. And I think we need to all have that expectation that everybody's priority legislation, as important as it is to them, as important as it is to their constituents, a lot of that may have to wait a year. And that's not anything anybody wants to hear, but it's just the reality that we're going to have to deal with. I sit on the Appropriations Committee. I chair the Health Subcommittee on Appropriations. There are a number of issues going on right now with healthcare, as you all could imagine, and the funding of healthcare. The COVID rollout is top priority for that, the vaccine rollout, I mean. I just scheduled a briefing today for the 19th with the Health and Government Operations Committee on the COVID vaccine rollout. And how that's going to be done, how that is progressing, how it's going to be ramped up. Because as you know, there's phase 1A, phase 1B, 2, and 3. And as you get to the next step, it's a significantly larger group of people. And so we need to make sure that we are keeping up with the demand for the people in those individual groups, that access is available, that people don't have to travel very far to be able to get a shot, that they can go to their doctor's office or a local hospital or some sort of a vaccine, center, this inoculation center. But we need to make sure that as we move from phase to phase, the larger group of people in each phase have that same equal access. So that's going to be our number one priority when we get there. Passing the budget is also a number one priority. What Congressman Trone talked about in terms of behavioral health issues, mental health, addiction issues, those have been spiking dramatically during the COVID, during this 2020 COVID pandemic isolation. And all the providers that I speak to on a regular basis are seeing it exponentially, and they're seeing it in ways that they've never seen it before. The ages of people, the diversity of people coming in, the severity of it. It's been worse than it's ever been. And so we're going to need to make sure that that those processes are in place and those providers are getting the funding they need. They're not getting the funding they need right now because we have a new Medicaid provider in the state for behavioral health that hasn't been paying providers on time. Their systems are completely screwed up. The Hogan administration completely screwed up the rollout of the new Optum um, uh, provider system, and it's the patients, the clients, and the providers that are suffering for it. So that is number one priority for me, to make sure that gets fixed this year as quickly as possible. Multiple other issues with other departments that I oversee from a budget perspective. Yeah, Melissa, there you go. See, Optum is a nightmare. Optum has been a complete disaster. Um, other issues that the administration has been dealing with from a healthcare perspective, that have been a problem but are now becoming an even worse problem. From a legislative point of view, I'm actually only putting in 5 bills this year. I have a number of bills that I've been pushing for a couple of years. I'm going to put them on the back burner for this year. There's a couple of new ideas that I have for legislation. I'm putting those on the back burner this year, and I'm only putting in 5 bills. And to be perfectly fair, at least 2 of them I don't actually expect to pass. I'm putting them in because I think they're important, and we still need to have that conversation. But I am reintroducing my bill to provide menstrual products in all of our schools for free to the students. That passed out of the House last year with almost a unanimous vote, I believe. It just didn't get to the Senate in time because we shut down early. So I'll be reintroducing that. I think it's got good prospects this year. I have a great Senate sponsor, and we're going to get that one out. I'm reintroducing my bill to repeal the state song. I'm not going to go on a long tirade about how ridiculous our state song is, but given the fact that yesterday we saw somebody marching with a Confederate flag through the U.S. Capitol, just puts that much. I mean, they weren't even able to get a Confederate flag into the U.S. Capitol during the damn Civil War. And yesterday we saw some wackadoo walking through our U.S. Capitol with a traitorous flag. It's time for us to change our state song. We don't need it. It is literally a love letter to the Confederacy. And I know that I think we have the support of the speaker this year to get that done. So I'm excited about that. And I have a bill on that. I think there's like 3 other bills on that. And that's okay. I don't care which one passes. I don't care if we combine them all into some other idea. As long as we get rid of it, I don't care. So we're going to get that done. I'm going to bring back my net neutrality bill. I know that there's a lot of excitement about Joe Biden being elected president, and hopefully the new chair of the FCC, whomever they may be, will overturn that rule again and bring back net neutrality. But until it's in statute, either in every one of the 50 states or through Congress, it's going to be a ping pong ball back and forth on net neutrality. So I'm going to be putting that in again because we do need to get it done. And then there's going to be some bills that I'm going to put in dealing with procurement oversight. I think you all remember I went on a little bit of a tirade this year when it comes to the governor buying COVID testing from South Korea, circumventing our procurement process, overpaying for the tests, finding out they didn't work, having to pay more for new tests, engaging in a contract with a company to get PPEs and ventilators, a company that didn't exist 2 weeks earlier than they signed a $12 million contract with the state, with no guarantee that they knew what they were doing. I have been doing the oversight on that work. I have been writing letters to the administration. I have been publishing, op-eds. I have been asking very difficult questions during briefings. And so we need some legislation to fix that system a little bit, to make sure that a governor cannot just simply buy whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and simply use an emergency as an excuse to spend taxpayer money. Emergencies are emergencies, but emergencies is when we need rules in place the most. So that's going to be primarily my session. I have some bond bills as well that I'm looking forward to putting in as well. I haven't had a good bond bill in a couple of years, so one that was just my own. So I'm excited about that. And that's going to be my session. Happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. And I'll turn it over to Gabe. First person on my screen, Gabe.
Right. Thanks a lot, Krill. And let me just say first, thanks to Michael Tardif and the District 39 Democratic Club and all of the folks who were instrumental in organizing this evening's virtual town hall. As Krill mentioned, normally we would be meeting in person, breaking bread, connecting and catching up, and really just having a good time. And even though we aren't able to do that, we wanted to ensure that we're still keeping you in the loop and keeping you informed of about what your District 39 team is doing, both in Annapolis as well as during this COVID-19 pandemic, to ensure that aside from legislation, that your needs are being met, whether it's around unemployment insurance. And I've certainly received a lot of emails from folks and families across District 39 about unemployment insurance and getting a response from the Department of Labor, from the Unemployment Insurance Office, or follow up, et cetera. And so we are just really grateful and thankful for everyone for joining us this evening, especially during a time like this when we see blatant acts of terrorism taking place, incited by someone who has shown over the past 4 years that there really is no bottom for him, right? There really is no low. And so we have to ensure that we're being vigilant and we're being engaged. This is a democracy if we can keep it. And we have to not only be paying attention, but we have to ensure that we're holding our elected officials accountable, and we're demanding the kind of changes that we'd like to see. It kind of reminds me of a saying from Plato where he said the punishment for people who don't pay attention to the affairs of public is to be ruled by evil men, and I'll add evil women as well. And we see that today. This is what happens when we don't pay attention and when we're not engaged. We have people who abuse authority and power. And so we have to demand better, and we have to demand accountability. And so thanks again for everyone for coming this evening. I'll just touch on a couple of things really briefly because I want us to save some time for Q&A. But like my colleagues, I'm looking forward to this session and to all of the big issues that we're going to be addressing, from education reform to the Built to Learn Act to Kerwin, to including police reform, a lot of legislation we're going to be dealing with to ensure that we're bringing about police transparency and accountability, but also looking at other things such as how do we provide a relief package, a COVID relief package to Marylanders across our state who are not just hurting right now, but will continue to be reeling from this pandemic. But we also need to focus on how do we ensure that we are protecting and that we're serving small businesses as well, the mom and pop shops whose doors have been closing over the past few months, and more small businesses who are saying that they would likely close their doors if they don't get the kind of assistance that they need. And so there's a lot of things that we need to address in this upcoming session. It's going to be different, but I'm going to be introducing a number of bills, but I just wanted to touch on a couple that I think are important to include, legislation around police reform. As folks know, the Speaker of the House created a work group on police accountability, and I was honored to be appointed to that work group to not only listen, but convene various stakeholders and experts and victims and their families and communities to figure out how we can submit the best recommendations to ensure that we're bringing about greater transparency and accountability, because we know that is how we build trust between communities, law enforcement, and the broader communities that they serve. Is when there is transparency, when there is community oversight, and when there's proper accountability when laws and policies have been broken, and communities having confidence in those systems. And so the work group put out a number of recommendations, which is available online. Folks can take a look at the work group recommendations. And it included a number of things from, we voted to recommend the repeal of the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. Maryland was the first state to pass this horrendous law that in essence provides procedural protections to officers accused of misconduct, as well as it impedes community oversight in many ways. We also recommended some stuff around use of force, around independent prosecutions, and body camera and body footage and storage. And so all of that is going to be put into legislation that we will ultimately look at, debate, and vote on. I just want to point out that I've introduced House Bill 151, which would repeal the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights fully. I think it's a necessary step that is certainly long overdue. And any discussions about reimagining public safety or about police accountability must include the full repeal of this statute that studies after studies, experts after experts, not just in our state, but across the country, are showing is a huge impediment and needs to go. I'll also be reintroducing Anton's Law, House Bill 120, along with Senator Jill P. Carter from Baltimore City. And this is really complementary legislation to the repeal of the LEOBR. What this does is it reforms the Maryland Public Information Act to ensure that the public have transparency. And this is critical. The LEOBR deals with everything after an investigation, a complaint, or a charge, or a death. MPIA deals with how police departments and agencies do their jobs and how transparent they are with the public. And so Anton's Law, named after Anton Black, would reform the MPIA to ensure that we're making police misconduct records public. I will also add that a recent Goucher poll was done by Goucher College in Baltimore that showed that 87% of Marylanders support greater transparency, but also making police misconduct records public and maintaining a database. And so Anton's Law would do just that, as well as ensure that complainants understand what the disposition of their complaint was. And so I'm hoping that we could get that done this year, because we really can't be pushing real reform if we're not reforming the MPIA and we're not moving forward on Anton's Law. I also want to point out House Bill 1040, which is the Commission on History, Culture, and Civics in Education. This is really important. It's a bill that I've been working on with the teachers' unions, a number of educators and advocacy groups. In essence, if passed, it would create an inclusive commission made up of diverse communities, from African-American to Latinx to Indigenous to LGBTQ+, to the disability community, to educators and administrators, to, in essence, look at our public school curriculum and work together to ensure that we are updating and providing a culturally responsive and culturally relevant curriculum where our students can see themselves reflected. We know data shows that students excel academically when there are culturally relevant and responsive curriculums and culturally competent educators providing instruction. And so this bill, really proud of it, because as we're looking at education reform, we really have to look at what kind of a quality education we're providing to our kids. I'll also be introducing some other bills around LGBTQ, related to LGBTQ seniors and protection, strengthening protections around there, around public campaign finance reform. We know that we need to deal with the influence of corporate and dark money in Maryland politics. And the way we do that is through public campaign finance reform. Montgomery County has done it. It's time we do it at the state level. And then also around a bill that I think is important is the Healthy Maryland Act, that in essence would bring about Medicare for all in Maryland. I think when we are living through a pandemic, we can no longer make excuses to Marylanders and really to the American people why we cannot implement a universal healthcare system that ensures that everyone is covered and everyone receives quality care and does not go bankrupt just by seeking these kind of a services. In the wealthiest state, in the wealthiest country in human history, we can certainly make this a reality. And the Healthy Maryland Act is a bill that I'll be reintroducing. And I just want to give credit to Delegate Resnick, who also has a universal healthcare bill that he's put in. We have different ideas on how to get there. But the commitment is that, we need to see more Marylanders insured. We need to ensure that they have quality healthcare, and this is no longer a problem. Prior to the pandemic, over 400,000 Marylanders were uninsured. As a result of the pandemic, we are now looking at over 500,000 Marylanders who do not have health insurance and cannot seek proper care because of the expense. So we really need to do better, and we really need to wrestle with these big ideas. But other bills I'll be working on, but those are some pretty major ones. I'll be reintroducing universal basic income, because I think it's an important discussion for all of us to have around economic justice and what direct cash assistance would do for working people and for poor folks. And so happy to talk about that some more. But with that, I want to turn it to Delegate Leslie Lopez, and happy to answer any questions later on. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabe. 45 minutes into it, we're on our third delegate. We're taking it home, guys. Gonna get to your questions very shortly. First and foremost, I just want to thank everyone for jumping on my very impromptu Zoom last night for an all-faith prayer vigil and moment of community. I think it was just really important for everyone to meet and have a moment and just share everything that's going on their minds. The one difficult part of that for me was that it was totally nonpartisan, and I had to keep my mouth closed, even though there were so many things that I wanted to say. Yesterday was a huge day for our party and for progressives. To turn Georgia, a southern state, blue is a huge success. And that success is largely because of the African American women that have been leading in that state, like Stacey Abrams. And they were deprived their moment in the sun. And that it breaks my heart, and it makes me so angry. When I look at the people who are on this call and the people that signed up for emails, I know so many of you were making phone calls and sending postcards and texting and doing all of those things, and that success is yours too. And I hope that even despite, domestic terrorists who got the red carpet rolled out for them, essentially, there was some success there. One thing that hasn't really been making the news, also horrible about yesterday, was that it was the highest death toll of any day to date for COVID. There were about 3,900 people who died of COVID specific related illnesses yesterday. And so when we look at this upcoming session, everything we do is through that lens. I have 3 bills this session, which is a significantly reduced number from other times. 2 of them are very COVID specific. To speak to the questions about guns going on in the chat, there's been a 70% increase in gun sales in this past year over the previous year. And that's to do with the fear that people have regarding the pandemic and all the associated fears of what people are suspecting have happened. One of the things that we've seen really proliferate is ghost guns. And ghost guns are essentially a firearm that doesn't have any serialization. It was made without serialization. And so I've been working with all sorts of advocacy groups, with the Maryland State Police, with people really across the country to come up with something that will allow law enforcement to go after criminal enterprise gangs, namely, and allow people who are hobbyists to still make their firearms, because they have a Second Amendment right to make a firearm at home. Some people are into that. As long as you're abiding by the law, it's fine. The thing about ghost guns also is that they impact primarily communities of color. And so there's lots of issues with guns. The other one to note is that mental health right now during COVID is specifically an issue. 60% of all gun-related deaths are suicide. And so it seems kind of, with everything going on with COVID, it seems like kind of a secondary issue, but making sure that we have the right types of checks in place to ensure that guns aren't going into people who are exploitative and have criminal intent. Making sure those guns don't get in their hands is really important for everyone in our community. The other bill that I have been working on for a while now helps people who are being exploited around private student loan debt. And you may have seen in the CARES Act at the federal level, people who had federal student loans received some relief. Certainly, it's not enough. It's significant, but not enough to help everyone in the way they need to be helped. People who take out private student loans are the most economically vulnerable people trying to, get a leg up and go through the process of higher education. And unfortunately, there's folks that understand that the courthouses are closed and they can still do their business of doing wage garnishments, and they set up very fraudulent trusts to exploit these people that are already economically vulnerable. And so this bill will be heard on the 20th of January. We've got a really broad support of folks, people from labor, AARP. It might surprise you to know that the people who are most vulnerable to student loan defaults are actually senior citizens. People think of it as a millennial issue, but it's not, because seniors are co-signing for their kids and their grandkids. And, when your child or your grandchild doesn't get a job, it impacts you. And people who are already on a fixed income are having to forego groceries and prescription drugs at a time where they're very vulnerable too. And so that's something I'm really excited to hopefully make it through this year. Those are the big ones for me. I do have to say, to the police reform bit, I'm on the Judiciary Committee. I'm the one lone D39 representative that's not on the Money Committee. And so I'm looking forward to hearing all the work that Delegate Acevedo has been working on with the working group over the interim about policing reform. I've got so many emails from folks about it that I set up a police reform advisory council. And every month we've been having a speaker come in, essentially kind of talking about a lot of the main points that the working group has been talking about, just to give people a chance to learn the same things I'm learning as I go about this process, and give them a chance to voice what their insights are and what their personal experiences are, because it's very important to make sure that as lawmakers, we're thinking from the perspective of the practitioners and the people who are most impacted by these laws. So it's been a great experience, and I thank everyone who's participated in that. One call to action before we go and pass it over to questions is that I want to say that inauguration is coming up January 18th. I know we are all looking forward to that for a number of reasons. But I do want to point out that it's a national volunteer day. And so if you have, or you're planning your day and you want to watch the inauguration as a virtual event, as I think at this point it's probably going to be all virtual. You want to think of other things to add into your day and volunteer, let me know, because I'm organizing people to volunteer on that day through the inauguration committee. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you waiting till the end to hear me. I did it in 7 minutes. I hope that was fast enough for everyone.
Great.
Thanks.
Can I just add a quick thing here? I think we have some elected officials here that need to be introduced, but Tom Hucker is here, the new county council president, and he and I talked earlier today, and I just wanted him to give kind of a quick little update from the county, just to let people know where we are and what we're kind of facing. Just a quick clip. Go ahead, Tom.
Sure. Thank you, Nancy. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks to everybody who turned out. You have a very effective and powerful delegation, so I'm glad to be here with you. The county is having a hard time like everybody else. We're in the middle of the worst economy since the Depression and the worst health crisis since the Spanish flu. So we've been extremely busy and extremely active ever since this started in March. We've issued 30 special appropriations for over $250 million to put lots of money on the street for food relief and personal protective equipment, obviously, and keeping our buses and community services running. Lots of small business grants, 22 million in that kind of work to keep our small businesses open. And we really were disappointed when Mitch McConnell recently took local aid out of the federal relief package that just passed on the Hill. And we're really counting on more aid from the state. So we're glad your legislators are going to help with that. And we've issued a big call to the governor to issue the money from the rainy day fund that he's been sitting on, over $1 billion that the state has for exactly times like these, that should be issued to the public when, we have 100,000 people in Maryland, in Montgomery County alone, that don't have an adequate food supply, and about 250,000 that are facing eviction. So there's an awful lot of pain out there. You all, I'm sure, are very aware of it. And we're glad that on the dawn of the legislative session is here so our legislators can help out. But I'm eager to answer any questions about ways we can help at the county level. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And it's good to have you in that seat to be able to work together with the state delegation and the county people. The only way we're going to get through this, I think, is for all of us working together and putting our heads together. So, and let me tell you, I was just thinking of one thing tonight that I probably talked to a half dozen people today that have said to me that seeing what happened in Washington yesterday just really energized people to do whatever they have to do to make this country better, that we are better than what we saw yesterday. So I just think it's a good thought to stick with us, because everybody I talked to today was energized in doing whatever they can do to make this country better. So there's that. Okay. Do you want to go ahead and introduce the other elected people that are here?
Yes. Hey, everybody. This is Peter Witzler. I'm going to attempt to moderate a little bit here, but with a strong leadership team such as our delegation, it's a bit of a tough role to fill. So please bear with me. But what I wanted to do is take a moment to just recognize we have some additional dignitaries or distinguished guests and elected officials here. So we've already heard from David Trone and Representative David Trone and Senator Van Hollen. And Councilmember Tom Hucker, but a few other folks just to recognize. We have, of course, the MCDCC leadership here as well. Linda Foley, thank you. And we have some members of the District 39 representatives for Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee, Moomin Bear and Juan Cardenas, thank you. We also have from the city of Gaithersburg and Dennis Enslinger, deputy city manager there. So thank you. And again, if I mispronounce someone's names, my sincere apologies. And if I don't have you on my list, it's because I couldn't, maybe you only signed in as a first name on the sign in there. So please let me know if I missed you here. We also have Terry O'Grady from the East Village Board of Directors in Montgomery Village. We have Marilyn Balcom, who's the president of the Greater Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce. We also have a few other organizations with us, and just welcome here. The Women's Democratic County Club of Montgomery County, and also Stephanie Graves with Montgomery Village Neighbors. I also saw that we're on my original list, but I see we also have some folks from the Alzheimer's Association. So thank you for joining us for this event as well. So for the Q&A, we thought, the delegation thought they would try to get to most of your questions that were submitted in advance in their initial remarks. So if there's a burning question that you believe didn't get answered, then what I'll ask you to do is take a minute to type it into the chat so the delegates can see it, and then we can try to take you live on the air as well. So if you have some questions, please put it in there, and thank you. I realize I missed David Coons, also an MCDCC member as well. So thank you for joining us, and please, if I missed you, it's not an error of, it's a error of omission. Is that there's some term like that. I'm messing it up.
Yeah, that's cool.
So questions for the delegation, you can put them in the chat. We can also try to unmute you to take them live. It's been a lively debate and conversation happening in the chat as well. So great to see that. All right, so do you have a couple?
There's a question here about redistricting that I just wanted to
Please
address.
go ahead.
Unfortunately, there's not a lot that we have to say about the redistricting. This is kind of a Larry Hogan deal. So I know they're working on it. We're hoping that we come out of it well. That's about the best I can do. We're just not hearing much about it.
Anybody else on the redistricting issue? I do have a great question, and I apologize. I just have your initial ZK, but I think this is a really good one. So we heard from our delegation, so a lot of different priorities, but they're asking you to choose maybe just one. What is your highest priority? So, if you could maybe perhaps I'll editorialize a minute here. So if you could look back at the end of the session and say, boy, I'm the most proud of this accomplishment, this one thing that we did, what would that be?
So I'll just offer, there's a bill that we haven't talked about here tonight. That's not my bill. It's actually none of our bills. It's Chairman of ECM, Derek Davis's bill, and it's called the Essential Workers Bill of Rights. I think in addition to all of the COVID relief packages that we've kind of talked about, that's one that is critical. It is necessary for people who are on the front lines, and because of employment law being the way it is, they're totally susceptible to a whole bunch of violence and the virus and all sorts of awful things that have gone on with COVID. And so to me, it's not one of my bills, but to me that I would feel successful if I got a chance to vote for that bill, because I support it wholeheartedly.
I would have to still go back to I've spent 4 years, it seems like my lifetime on this Kerwin education plan. So I guess I would say it's a success if we can move forward with that. I don't think it's going to look exactly the same as it looked when we left Annapolis last March, but I think the mechanisms are in place to move forward in a fashion with it, and that would be probably the best success that I can see right now. And another one, since my colleagues are so slow to pick up, my big concern right now is hungry families. And I went to the Islamic Center with Moomin last week and watched 700 families pick up food. We're not making the mark. We're not, though we're doing a lot and people are doing as much as they can feasibly do. We've got to find a way to free up some money and some resources for these people, because winter's in and it's going to be a really rough next several months if we don't find some way to work this out.
Great. We do have one or two questions coming in on the chat right now too. So one is, can the D39 help support Delegate Jared Solomon's bill for school zones that lower speed limit rights by schools? Or speed limits right by school, I think is what that means. But that is one question that's come in. And then if anybody didn't get a chance to answer the first one from our friend ZK of, what's the most important thing you want to accomplish? Or
So I apologize. I had to step away for a minute and I missed the first question. So
sure. The first question was, if you could look back and what's the, you listed a lot of priorities, but if there's just one thing you could choose as your most important, your highest, or one thing, if you're looking back at, at the end of this session, boy, am I so glad that we did this one thing. What would that one thing be?
Wow, that's it's a hard question to answer with so much to do. It is my hope that we come out of session with a very clear plan on COVID vaccine distribution, continued testing, and financial resources that are in place to be able to help folks in the most need, to help set us up for a good economic recovery moving forward.
Yeah, I would just echo Krill. I think our COVID relief package, what we do for people who are suffering right now and will be reeling after this pandemic, as well as essential workers, that's critical. I think everything else, would certainly come after, in my mind, what we do to ensure that we get back to some kind of a normalcy, right, in this state. So definitely prioritizing the COVID relief package.
So we did have a lot of questions pre-submitted, so I'm taking a read through those too, and I might just throw one or two out to our delegation if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
And
the council president too. He's here, so.
And our council president, of course. So one is a pretty specific one around education. Is will you vote to override the governor's veto of the blueprint for Maryland's future?
Yes. Easy.
Yes.
Oh, that was an easy one.
I will vote to override every one of the 40 vetoes that he issued, as long as they come to the floor.
And I'll also add to Jen's question, yes, I'll be voting for the Trust Act as well.
Yes, I will be too.
Yep.
There are over 60 vetoed bills.
Is it 60? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many are going to, we're gonna take some of them up this Friday in the Senate. Not sure which ones exactly. We're gonna save some until the House is back in session so that we can kind of do them at the same time together. But we are gonna address some of them this Friday.
We do actually have another question in the chat. It's from Eric Colchumero, the Director of Government Affairs for Alzheimer's Association. But the question is, who is looking at the health department budget along with getting shots in the arms? How will you look at the MDH budget as it relates to healthcare quality this year? This pandemic has been disproportionately impacted seniors in long-term care facilities. And while there have been fines issued, there was also perpetual shortages in, I'm going to alphabet soup, I assume you guys know what this means, OHCQ staffing. Will you consider a renewed emphasis on this unit and ensure it is adequately funded?
One bill that I've got that I'm kind of excited to move forward with isn't kind of an accountability bill. We have not been able to get information out of the governor's office as to how they have spent the CARES money. We had heard in some places where they wasted it, sent it back because they didn't spend it. So I have actually a two-pronged bill, emergency bill. One is that by March 1st, they have to tell us how they spent the CARES money up till now, but they also have to, I think it's by July 1, have to give us a complete plan for how they are going to spend the CARES funding that is coming in now. I mean, it just isn't good business to not be accountable for it. It's every penny needs to be spent well. So that's one of my bills that's going in right away.
And healthcare budget is my daily bread for my time in Annapolis. I chair the Health and Social Services Subcommittee on Appropriations, and that is all I spend my time doing and looking at. There are a lot of issues, and I know that a lot of what's in your question is very specific and substantive, but the short answer to your question is yes, we're going to be doing a lot of oversight. There's been a lot that this administration has done right during the COVID pandemic, and I will give them credit where credit is due. But there is a whole lot that they have done very badly.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they have done very, very badly is the complete lack of transparency and the complete lack of cooperation when it comes to legislative oversight, with us asking to see things that we need a window into in order to be able to not just craft a proper budget, but to be able to provide the legislative oversight that we need to have functioning government. And I will give everyone a perfect example of a situation that happened just this week. There was budget language last year that we put into the Maryland Department of Aging that required them to provide information to us with regard to their upcoming budget and what changes they anticipate to that budget. And the reason we asked it was because the local area associations of aging, the AAAs that distribute the funds to seniors in our communities, have complained to us for years that they have gotten their money so late and that they have not been able to, and well, they have gotten their money so late and they have been notified of the cuts to their money so late that they have been unable to properly account for and distribute the money that they need to be able to take care of seniors. And they asked us to make sure that we try and get the department to not just acknowledge this, but give us information in advance. So we required a report from the Department of Aging to say, tell us how much money you're expecting and when you expect to notify the AAAs of when they're going to get it. And the report was due on December 31st. On December 23rd, I got a report. It was one sentence. It says it said, you will know about the anticipated budget of the Department of Aging when the governor releases his budget. That was the response. It was so insulting and so deficient that my letter back to Secretary Kramer was basically threatening to hold up her whole budget if I didn't get an answer before session started. This is what we have been dealing with the department with regard to the Department of Health, the Department of Aging, the Department of Social Services, and many others. They don't believe in legislative oversight, and they don't let us in unless we threaten them. And that's what it's been for the last 6 years. So we're going to see
back to the governor.
It all does go back to the
It all
governor.
goes back to the governor, and he doesn't let people, he won't allow people to work with our committees and give information or give any kind of help of any kind. They're not allowed to come and come to our hearings and voice their opinions. He does not allow any of that. So it's like trying to hang wallpaper with one arm. It just
But we're going to be focused on it. We have a colleague from Frederick County, a Democratic colleague from Frederick County, who once said, and I will use crass language, so I apologize if it offends anybody, but she says that the governor does not see us as a partner in governing. He sees us as a pimple on his ass for 90 days.
mhm.
So that's what we've been dealing with. But we're going to keep hammering at him for as long as it takes.
So I'm going to, I'll also, of course, anybody feel free to jump in and answer the questions that you're seeing, or if there's something you saw on the pre-submitted questions, please do so. I'm going to attempt a bit of a daily double here. There was a request to deal with the environment. Sort of a two-part question is one, what concrete actions are you willing to take on the climate crisis, including but not limited to the expansion of 270? And the second is partially a county issue, but comments on the proposed industrial solar farm in the ag reserve. Perhaps that's dealing with state funds to support that. It's not an issue I'm familiar with. But if you support that to come on conditional use, or should the ag reserve master plan be amended to allow them? After I read that, I guess that is certainly more of a county issue. Apologies.
County issue.
Yeah, I heard a couple of state ones. I'll say two things though. As far as the climate crisis, I think there are two important things that folks don't realize. One is that Maryland still relies on coal plants for energy, and we need to move and wean ourselves off of that reliance on coal and the kind of a contribution it has to the climate crisis. I support us phasing out our reliance certainly more quickly than what was proposed. I think the owners of these coal plants proposed what is in the next 5 or 7 years to shut down the coal plants. I think the urgency of the climate crisis requires us phasing them out sooner. And I'll also add, as far as what we have done, we've done quite a bit around environmental justice issues over the past year and a half, and I think we're going to be taking up a lot more. But I also think folks need to take a look at Delegate David Frazier Hidalgo's bill that he's been putting in for some time to tax carbon. And I also support that. I think we need to really look at some drastic responses to protecting the environment and to protecting the future generation. And that has to include getting off our reliance on coal, taxing carbon, and do not allow fracking, as we saw the Board of Public Works was recently considering. Do not allow fracking in Maryland because of the environmental and economic impacts it has for our state and for low-income communities.
Sure. I'd also add, don't count trash incineration as a renewable energy source. That's a big one, not just for our state, but just in the area too. And I think it's important for us to look towards any type of partnerships we can with Pennsylvania and West Virginia and Virginia, because we are geographically a small state, and what they do in their state impacts us and our water sources. In terms of like all the 270 and transportation stuff, I think, just big picture, when it comes to COVID, the way people work has changed. And if there's a way that we can get people to commute less and incentivize employers just to get people off the highways, to me, that's like an immediate first step. And that's a great, we have kind of like a once in a generation opportunity to push that now. So for me, that would be a priority, just to make that cultural shift, because from there, all of the infrastructure shifts and changes, we can assess what needs to happen then.
And I want to comment very quickly on something that Brenda put into the chat about California requiring all new construction to come with solar. Delegate David Frazier Hidalgo, we keep invoking his name. He's the delegate from District 15 next door, and he is a superstar on the Environmental Matters Committee. He and I had talked about similar legislation like that for a couple of years, and that is something that we have been looking at as well. And I think that's a great idea. Some would say that it is not feasible to do so, but I disagree. I think it is. I think that our biggest problem right now with individual solar on rooftops is that we have spent 100 years building homes that are not compatible with solar. We have, pipes sticking out of roofs in awkward places. We have lines and electrical lines and everything else sticking out of the roofs in awkward places. And so you can't maximize solar panels on these roofs. But if we require it from the beginning, it will be, the architecture will figure itself out. And for all the folks that say that, well, it would cost more to do this, to provide more, I always tell them that there was a time we did not require indoor plumbing into houses. And I guarantee you that whoever the industry was at the time, when that was being contemplated, they say, oh, it would increase the cost of housing tremendously. And I challenge anyone to find an outhouse anywhere in Montgomery County still. We got over it. But when it comes to solar, it will end up paying for itself and ultimately become cheaper when you put individual solar on your house, and those panels are going to get more and more efficient and better as we go. So that is something that we are looking at. Again, this coming session is going to be tight, and I don't think this is the year for it, but there are other initiatives like shutting down the coal plants are going to be a big one, continuing to provide community solar incentives and other bills. And yeah, with 270, we said for years, the way to fix 270 is to get cars off the road, to encourage teleworking, to encourage telecommuting. And we were always told that's never going to work. That's never going to work. Well, guess what? We forced it to happen. We didn't force it to happen. The damn disease forced it to happen. And all of a sudden, cars are off the road. Carbon loads are dropping in the air. It's like Thanos snapped his fingers and suddenly things are getting better. Sorry, that is a comic book reference. I know not everybody gets it. Peter gets it. Thank you very much. But yeah, there are better solutions. And I know that the county council and the county executive have proposed, a very reasonable, moderate change to provide for additional reverse lanes down the center. It would expand 270, but it wouldn't take any land, and it wouldn't increase our footprint, and it wouldn't put more cars on the road. It would just provide for a better commuting option. And that has been soundly rejected over and over again by the Department of Transportation, and I just can't contemplate why. But we don't need that expansion. What we need is better solutions.
So I'll invite anybody else to respond to the sort of questions on the floor if they'd like to, but I want to maybe try to switch gears a little bit as well and throw one or two questions out around economic security and economic support. So one is, certainly in District 39, there's a lot of small business owners. So the question is around what financial assistance can we or have we offered to small businesses who are either at risk of going out of business or maybe even have recently gone out of business, unfortunately, due to the pandemic. And then there's also been sort of vigorous messages in the chat. And then there was a question submitted as well as, what about this unemployment claims backlog? It seems to be a pretty sticky wicket. So if the delegation has some thoughts or even just advice for residents on how to deal.
The unemployment issue has been awful since the get-go. I mean, and they keep saying they've got it fixed. They've got a new system. And it's still, my staff, all of our staffs have spent just about full time since March working on claims for people. My chief of staff, Patty Horton, is listening here and she'll probably shoot me, but she's really good at helping people with this. So I'm trying to stick to only people in my district, but if you've tried and can't get through to unemployment, give us a call and we'll see what we can do to help you out. I want to address one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet tonight about COVID recovery, small business, and people that are out of jobs. Montgomery College is working on this. Most of the community colleges in the state are, but Darian Pollard is just she's right on with it. They were on it immediately. They've got all kinds of programs for people whose jobs are now obsolete. They can't go back to, companies closed, won't be reopening. And it's it's almost like a boot camp. I think they're calling it a boot camp, actually, to train people for other jobs so that they can get jobs. We have over 19,000 biotech jobs in the state that are not filled because we don't have qualified people to work those jobs. It's going to take a real mindset change for a lot of people, but there are some really good jobs that are there if they can just get a little bit of training. It's not a lot, but if they can get some training and be able to change fields and get a job, it's just what we're going to have to do. But I really applaud Montgomery College because they started doing it before people were hardly even talking about it. But now it's gotten to be a pretty big subject in most of the meetings that I'm talking to about it. So if you know anybody that is in that position, head them towards Montgomery College and see what they can do. Okay, Peter, I took you completely off track. Now what?
No, it's okay. I think you answered the question about unemployment claims and how to deal with that. Just invite any of the other delegation to respond to that. Or I can definitely try to tease out a couple other questions.
I just thought of something when you mentioned about how wonderful Montgomery College is. And then I have not really talked about this too much, but I have a partnership with Montgomery College where every 2 months we do a blood drive there. And there is a desperate lack of or desperate need for blood donations. If you are someone who can donate, there's going to be the next one. I think February 23rd is when it's at. So far, there's been 2,100 people that have donated blood, and it's working out really great thanks to Montgomery College's cooperation and just excellent care of their facilities. And they're just an amazing asset to Up County in every single way. If you could, I'll send, is the Germantown campus. I'll send around emails about the next one, but it's been a really successful program, and it's been successful because people have been contributing and showing up. So thank you so much for that. I know Kirill has donated a few times actually.
Yeah, first you invited me to come volunteer, and I did, and eventually ended up in a chair with a needle in my arm. So, you know.
I'm very persuasive, Kirill.
No, it's fine. It's good, and I'm happy to do it. And you know, it's interesting. I hadn't donated blood. I think I donated blood once before 2020, and it was actually a terrible experience for me, and I never did it again. I think this year I've donated 4 pints at this point, and I'm still doing more. So we need it. We need every blood type. The hospitals need it. I got this incredible, and I don't even know if it's real. I'll be honest with you. I think they could have just slapped anybody's picture on there. But the American Red Cross sent me by email the picture of this little beautiful 5-year-old girl, and they said that my blood went to her, and and that she has cancer or some other condition that she had surgery for, and that my blood went to save her life. And at that point, I'm just like, okay, go ahead, take more. Like I said, I don't know if it's real. They could have slapped anybody's picture in there, but it marketing wise, it works well, and I encourage everyone to go do it.
I got the same girl, Kirill.
Oh yeah, there
No,
you
I'm
go.
just kidding. I'm just kidding. I didn't get anything when I donated, so it's.
So I do see a couple of questions that were submitted earlier, and we've talked about education. We've talked a little bit about law enforcement, but maybe sort of the link between the two. There's a few questions that were submitted about school resource officers or public school security guards, referred to in a few different ways. The question is a little bit sort of general, but just asking folks. One of them is getting SROs out of schools and reallocating funds to physical and mental health support, expanding access to healthcare, strengthening public health infrastructure, protecting health workers from workplace violence, and overriding the governor's veto. Well, we already talked about overriding the governor's veto of the Kirwan Commission, but yeah. So I guess the question is stance on getting SROs out of our schools and reallocating those funds to other needs.
Yeah, Pete, I can take that. I'll be introducing the Police Free Schools Act legislation that I've been working on with Delegate Janelle Wilkins from District 20, that in essence would repeal the SRO program and reallocate funding to the proven, like data proven solutions to keeping our kids safe, but also meeting their needs when they are within those school walls, such as counselors, more nurses, social workers, behavior specialists, better paid educators. And so the bill is something that we're working on along with NAACP, the Public Justice Center, Racial Justice Now, which is an organization here in Montgomery County that is also pushing at the county level to get SROs out of MCPS. And just so folks understand just the background to the issue, over last summer, the Montgomery County Office of Legislative Oversight, the OLO, issued a report that in essence showed that Black students accounted for a third of enrollment in MCPS, but over half of all of its arrests. And a majority of these arrests were for minor infractions, things that we would expect from young people, but we still see the folks who were disproportionately, in essence, not just arrested, but their education disrupted were Black students, followed by Latinx students, and students with disabilities, some students who identify as LGBTQ+. And what's clear is that we need to be looking at a program that historically has grown. There have never been SROs in public schools prior to the 1970s. In 1975, it was around 1%. Today, now really every school district, and the data continues to show that SROs in schools impact students of color, LGBTQ students, and students with disabilities, who make up a majority of the arrests for minor infractions. And so we have to ask ourselves, really, because police are either doing one of two things in our schools. They are either doing police things, which have no place in our schools, or non-police things that other professionals are trained and educated, went to college to do, but are paid less for. And so we really have to rethink this program, and we really have to rethink safety in our schools and what it means to center Black and Brown students and how they're impacted by SROs or cops in schools. So I'm happy to have a conversation with folks about that, but it's a bill that we're working on with a good bit of folks from the troubling data that we've seen in Montgomery County and across the state. I mean, I'm just speaking about Montgomery County, but the data from other jurisdictions like Charles County and Prince George's County is absolutely atrocious and frightening if we look at, just what it means for students of color and their education.
Let me just add quickly, many of you know, as an old dinosaur, I was on the school board back in the 90s, and when we put SROs into the schools, and I agree that we really have to it has to get fixed. I agree with that. But the only concern that I have is right now, if a child is acting out, or a student, whatever, is acting out, there's an SRO that is there that has been trained to work with kids. If we don't have an SRO in the school and students do whatever kids, especially high school kids, will do, that call brings in like 2 police cars, two regular policemen that may not have any training to work with kids. So it's kind of weighing which one of those. If you've got a high school student that you know is gonna get into some trouble, which one do you want to be dealing with your son or daughter? Do you want it to be somebody that is trained to work with kids or not? So I agree, Gabe, that we've got to fix this thing, but it's got a whole lot of sides to it too. Okay, 8:30. Want to take one more question?
I see Moomin has a question about vaccination. Moomin, just real quick, and just so folks know, there's a way for you all to stay updated as far as the state's vaccination plan and response, etc. But basically, if you were to sign up for updates from the state's 211 texting system, you can opt in by, in essence, texting MD for Maryland Ready to, and I'll put it in the chat, 898-211. But you would get updates, or you could go to covidlink.maryland.gov and all the information about vaccinations, where it's scheduled, what's going on, where we are, the numbers, et cetera, et cetera. As folks know, Maryland was the last state in terms of vaccinations, and we're also the last state in terms of responding to unemployment claimants. And I think it's a shame, but if folks want to stay, updated on what the state is doing on our vaccination plan, text, and I'll put it in the chat, MD Ready to 898-211, and you can sort of know. And that's the state stuff.
Then for Council President Hucker, is there any additions on the vaccinations there? If Gabe missed anything.
No, I think that's my unmuted. Yeah,
Okay.
getting a pop-up telling me to unmute myself. Yeah, overall, there's a lot of concerns, and some of it's been addressed very recently about the state's rollout. Of course, we're completely really at the mercy of the Maryland Department of Health, and a lot has been said about them. You should know that at our level, I'm just finding my numbers here. The governor at his press conference a couple of days ago called out Montgomery County as one of the counties that's doing the best. That was over 80%, had given out 80% of the vaccines that we had received. It's even gotten better than that recently. As of January 5th, we had administered 4,047 doses, which is 94% of our allocated vaccines from the state. We received an additional 8,600 doses on January 5th again. and they had doubled our allocation from the previous week because they saw us doing a good job. The total doses of the vaccine received as of January 6th, yesterday, is 12,900, and we've given out 9,500 of those we will have by January 8th. Our case rate, is terrible. 49,000 folks in Montgomery County have COVID. We've had over 1,100 deaths, and there's 6,000 deaths in the state of Maryland. We have a long way to go, and it's very frustrating that there's not a comprehensive plan from the federal government and from the state government. What happened with like last week's 4,300 doses that they gave us? They told us on Saturday what they were going to give us on Tuesday, and they gave us all to them, to us on Tuesday. So that makes it pretty hard to make sure you have enough test sites, make sure you have enough vaccinators, make sure everybody knows where they're supposed to be and it has the training they need. So it's been a very frustrating ramp up. It's hard to get the information from the state. We hope things are headed in the right direction. But anyway, appreciate all the help from our state lawmakers to hold their feet to the fire.
I believe that does mean we're actually, I think, over time.
I just want to thank everyone again for joining us tonight. We may end up doing another one. We'll do one at the end of session, but if it looks like that we have a lot of issues, we might do one ahead of that. So stick with us, and if we can do anything to help you, please let us know. Thank you, everyone. Good
Thank
night.
you all. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Duty to protect parkland,
Thank you.
which we own and manage.